Now we're going to move on to the second panel discussion, which will focus on the critical issue of ageism in tech. Despite the technological industry making rapid strides and influencing every sphere of our lives, it isn't immune to social biases such as ageism. To initiate discussion around this subject, we have here with us Chaya Pamula, co-founder and president and CEO. Where did I go? Oh. Who will initiate the proceedings. Please welcome her with a warm round of applause. You can use any of those.
Oh, can you hear me?
Is this working?
Hello? Okay, thank you. It's an interesting topic, right? And it's a delicate topic as well. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Chaya Pamula. I'm the co-founder, president, and CEO of PAM10 Inc. We are a global technology services company. And we have a few others on, as our panelists, so I would like them to introduce themselves briefly. Want to start with Kendall?
Are we on? Okay. I'm Kendall Egan. I'm the Director of Sales for Home Roots, which is a B2B wholesale company in the furniture vertical. We unite suppliers of home furnishings and decor with our customers, who are retailers, brick and mortar, large and small e-commerce, and licensed trade. So we make the B2B shopping experience just as easy as the B2C shopping experience.
I'm Mark Bodner. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development for WWTS Software Solutions. Our parent company, WWTS, is a global IT outsource provider offering services, I think, in every country around the world. Our group is based in New York, and we focus on helping enterprises in terms of all of their IT stuff, from cloud hosting all the way through software development, mobile apps, websites, complete digital transformation.
Hello, my name is Chalab. I'm the co-founder and president of Engagely, which is a people management platform built for organizations that want to engage their people, develop their people, and execute their strategy. We are based in St. Louis with offices in India and Europe and Malaysia as well.
And I'm Emily Carlson. I'm the Vice President of Technology for Divergent. Divergent is a healthcare consulting firm based in Virginia Beach, Virginia. We provide services to all of the major healthcare systems, helping to support their EMR and really overall EHR health and delivery, and have a technology arm to help bridge the gap between technical and clinical with our hospital systems.
Okay, thanks everyone. And I would like to keep this an interactive session. Ageism, as you all know, I'm also getting old, and my husband is also getting older. You know, I always felt technology never grows old. So people in technology also never get old. But some of my personal experiences working in corporate America, I also noticed that there is some kind of bias and stigma in the industry as people grow older. Especially in the technology industry, people would like to stick to their jobs, right? You see people working until they're 65, 70 years old because it's a lot of brain work, right? And people continue to stay in the job. But you also see that, I know it is illegal to ask the age, but you start to see that there are, you get the feelers that people are seeing, and when you want to switch your job when you're 50 plus, you start to think twice, right? Do I really want to switch the job? So there are such things in the industry. There are other industries we're not talking about it. We are going to be focusing primarily on technology in this industry. So when people are hired there is this bias, there is so much of discussion about diversity and inclusion, especially around gender and race. There's very little we talk about age bias. So when there is hiring happening, I personally noticed and experienced that people they always prefer younger ones to get onto the job. And the studies say that 1/3 of corporate America, there are probably more than 45 years old people working in corporate America, especially in the tech industry. And that number is growing. And baby boomers and also next gens, there is always this conflict, right? Whom do I want to hire? And if you look at some companies, the studies say that the median age in big companies like Facebook's, Google, Microsoft, you're looking at anywhere between 25 to 35. So what happens when people are getting older? So we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that we all experienced, and also we'll be talking about some solutions, how to combat that age bias. So I would like to start with this question about hiring. What better hiring practices we can have to encourage this age diversity? And I will start with saying, I think it's more than the age. We should be really focusing on the skill sets of the person. And I do have tremendous respect for people who have gained a lot of knowledge and experience on the job. And they could be great associates in the company. So I never saw age personally. Even my business partner is sitting here. In our company, we have a lot more older people than younger ones. We do hire younger ones as well. So I do want to start with Kendall. What are your thoughts around hiring?
So it's really interesting. We all were of an age where there weren't these majors in college, right? There wasn't a digital marketing major. There wasn't a business analytics major. We learned all of this by doing, and that is extremely important, that bootstrap knowledge, the learning by doing. If I had, in my career, not attempted to learn everything that was invented from 2000 on, where would I be? Like that conversation that just preceded us. That would have been like Greek. We would not have understood any of that if you hadn't had this continuous learning. And I think that in the hiring, look beyond the major and look at the work product. Look at what this person has done over the course of the career and ask questions on, well, you managed this ad campaign, you did this, how did you do that? How have you learned to implement these things? And really focus on, the examples and the, just the things that you've done versus that, again, the younger one with the shiny business analytics major.
So I'm not justifying it, but I think that one of the reasons that it occurs in the tech industry more than it does perhaps in other industries is that in the tech industry in general, we tend to look ahead. We look for something new and shiny, as Kendall said, and years of experience doesn't necessarily translate or isn't perceived to be as valuable as it is in other industries. And I think that, from the perspective of solving the problem, so, that's something that we kind of have to look, into, that's a really big picture, right? Like that's a policy issue. But how do individuals who are looking for jobs, hope to solve that problem? And I think that, that's one of the ways, in and of itself, but by showing that by virtue of your experience, you can be a problem solver. You can be a role model and a mentor. And I think that as the shift continues to occur in the world in terms of the speed, by which technology evolves, so I think there's a view that older people are perhaps more dependable and even more flexible. Your kids, from a practical perspective, your kids get out of the house A company wants people, back in the office. You don't need to be working from home. And I think that, somebody who maybe 10 years ago would have been perceived to be less flexible may be able to be perceived as being more flexible. People who have experience tend to have broader and larger networks, and I think, again, a much more positive work ethic than people who have come up, through the ranks over the past 15 or 20 years. So, even with all these benefits, it's still not easy, but I think before we start looking at the policy side and at the company side, job seekers themselves have to look within themselves and try to put forth the best product that they can.
So I think you have to start to get a little uncomfortable in what it is you're looking for, right? I mean, it's not the number of years, it's not, this technology over another. It's feeling empowered to reach outside of where your comfort zone has been for 20 years and take on a new challenge, and look at reverse mentoring. If I'm going into a new position and I've reached out of my comfort zone, seeking a younger mentor to help guide me. That's a two-way relationship that comes of great value from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when ageism exists, or to some extent it pervades, is because we conflate youth and agility, and they're two different things. You can still be agile and that's where the growth mindset comes in, even if you're not young, and that's where this distinction needs to be made very clearly. So looking at somebody, when you say how do you remove that bias, it's looking at somebody, has that person shown a proclivity towards adaptation to different environments over time. For example, when I came from a engineering technology background, my first job was in writing in COBOL, which is pretty much dead technology at this point. But you learn, and as I was listening to the panelists before us on the whole cookie issues, and that was like, that's a big aha moment, right? For us as as entrepreneurs and business development people, like that's something we need to look at, and that's where if you can display an agility where you can learn new things and see problems. And that actually, you could benefit from that if you're older, because that can affect you more adversely than if you were experienced in doing that in the past.
Yeah, I think all great points, right? So skill and knowledge is one thing. It's a funny story I'll share with you. I'm on a board of few organizations, and one of the boards, most of the people on the board, the members were all over 60, right? And I was, the board chair was talking to me and said, I think we're going to make some changes in the board because people are older, we have some older people on the board. I said, is it the age issue, right? It's really not the age issue. It's because they're not coming up with innovative, creative ideas, right? So that also leads into, what is that we can do? I mean, there is this continuous learning process, right? So especially in the technology industry, everything is changing as we speak. So how do we keep ourselves up to date so we are not, outdated, and people don't attach that to the age? It's really about the skill. Any other thoughts from anyone? Please feel free to share.
So I think, and I totally agree with that, it's about your agility, and your adaptability. I don't need to be on TikTok, but I have to understand TikTok. I need to know how it works. Like, I don't have to be a player in the sandbox, but I have to know, every time something new gets invented, and that's that whole continuous learning mindset, is that you just have to jump in and figure it out. And if you've used Vine back in the day, you know what TikTok is. If you've used Trello, you can use Airtable. And all of these things, nothing is that outside the box. You just have to try it. And that's, part of that continuous learning is just logging in and doing it.
I agree with Emily, whether you call it, reverse mentoring or 360 mentoring. I think that mentoring companies and learning, giving off, learnings, teaching, and gaining learning at the same time, I think is very helpful. There's no doubt that skills fight ageism. So whether it's cross-training or learning completely new languages. And then, I don't think that there's a secret sauce, right? On the one hand, you can say that in certain instances, specialization, could be helpful, right? Having deep domain knowledge in the critical language and gaining a reputation as a specialist, right? On the other hand, it could be that situationally becoming a jack of all trades can be helpful and finding places to add value. But I think it does boil down to what you guys said, which is become an innovator, right? Show it off, flash it.
Do any of you want to add anything?
I think I was going to go back to that point you made earlier about mentoring and reverse mentoring. So if we look at technology, it's a broad set of skills. It's not just develop, coding and engineering work. It's also planning those projects. It's also trying to understand your target audience. It's also understanding, making bets on what will work, what won't work, not just the underlying technology, but what type of product we need to build. There are so many areas, and I would say if you look at any technology company, the actual engineering part of the work is less than 30%, maybe 20% in most organizations. So I think it's actually a disservice to your own organization if you start taking ageism as an issue. So, and going back to your point, the whole mentoring and reverse mentoring comes into play because as a older, hopefully wiser person, you can provide more guidance on why we shouldn't just blindly jump on something and start building stuff without it being proven, for example, because a lot of technologies come out and they don't survive 6-9 months, a year out. But also we can understand, okay, if something is cool being done by a competitor, doesn't necessarily mean you should do it too, because they're just trying something, they're flailing around and they're trying something new that may or may not work. And those are some of the wisdom that you impart as a person who's had experiences because you've gone through those struggles and the battles in the past. But at the same time, the reverse mentoring comes into play because now you can understand what a technology could do, potentially a new technology that might give you ideas on how you might want to think about your product and your competition and your market and build better products because that's where you can both help each other in that context.
Yeah, that legacy knowledge that somebody brings to the table while someone else brings the new technology, those two blended together are the perfect relationship for success.
I mean, there's studies shown that the most successful startups are started by individuals who are 40 years old. It's not because they're most talented in technology. It's because they've fought their battles and they know where the bodies are buried,
And 40 years is still not that that edge, but I think 50 plus is probably...
They're starting at 40
Yes.
plus, so they're probably successful at 50 plus, right?
Right.
Well, I think a lot of women are starting at 50 plus.
Yeah,
I would say
that's
that, there are doors that close, and it is a very good avenue. And especially, how many women lost their jobs in the pandemic, and there has been a lot of coaching to start your own business.
Yeah, that's very true. And, that also leads into age diversity in companies, right? And I believe in age diversity because we all spoke about all the good points about having that balance and having that combined partnership between a senior employee and a junior employee. We also talked about the mentorship, how that works. Because seniors in the company have a lot of history with the company and knowledge with the company. And as people come in, they can become the culture ambassadors. Especially culture plays a huge role, right? The company's culture. At the higher management, if they don't believe in this, then they make these decisions based on the age. I think that's going to be impacting the company overall. So the culture is an essential thing. What is are there any recommendations around what should be the diversity? How do we balance that? Is it 50-50 or 40-30? Any thoughts around that?
It's probably, it can lend itself to a pretty politically incorrect conversation, right?
Careful.
Because, right, I mean, the way that the world is today is, diversity is front and center in every conversation. And I think that as much as everybody's, shooting for diversity, you'd have to have a really strong backbone to come out and say, I think that, every company should be X% this and X% that, and, mix in a little bit of that. So I think that, the goal should really be to remove age-related barriers, the same way that, we would say that gender or race or, the way we identify ourselves, shouldn't be a barrier to how we can perform in a job. I think that, removing age-related barriers is critical, but it is up to all of us, right? And again, you have sort of, from a policy perspective, I really don't know how that gets done. I think that it takes a lot of people, the same way that, your vote doesn't necessarily count, but we go out and vote because each vote does count. And I think that age is probably something that lends itself, even more to the, to the operation of a company than gender or anything else, because with age does come experience. Being a man or a woman, or how you identify yourself, or how you, whether you're, straight, not gay, and, I don't think that those things they're experiential, but I don't think that those things necessarily lend themselves to how good a developer you can be. I think that by definition, age indicates that have had more time to do a certain thing. And, I don't know how we drop those barriers, other than people saying, I'm going to hire more experienced people, and I'm going to train people, who are a bit, maybe outdated. And, I'm going to, when somebody asks for help, we're going to give it.
Great point. It's about training too, right? As if it is there in the culture of the company, they would train their employees rather than in only focusing on hiring new, fresh people and training them. I think it's also important to train your existing employees because they, as I said, they have the history and they have the knowledge around how to navigate through the system in the company. So it's important to focus on both sides. Yeah.
But I think you need to fill the job description. So, it's writing that robust job description, and then when you're in that hiring mode, don't discount someone because of their graduation date. That's not a plus or a minus, and that really is on all of us who are interviewing and, looking at the wealth of experience. I'm working with someone, a recent college graduate, and it's wonderful. And there's still trainings, to your point, this is how you make a calendar invite. Because they're young, it doesn't mean like all of this stuff is just right in here. There are trainings. And she fit the job description, and so that is really important. There's, it's not like X% has to be over 40, X% under 40. It's like, well, just keep an open mind in your hiring when you're interviewing, that you're not going to discount someone for wherever they fall on that midline of 40.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, again, I go back to it being almost an empowerment of culture in the way that you do your outreach. So if you look at that job description and somebody check marks the box, but maybe they're younger, it doesn't matter. Being open and welcoming a culture of change and openness from a diversity and inclusion perspective, from looking at it from ageism, I think that's really important. And I think it's challenging all of your hiring managers to maybe think outside of what the typical standard process has been, and allowing it to look a little bit different to make sure you've got a diverse environment.
Well, I want to add one thing from experience we've had. We have a sales team selling technology products, right? And we have people as young as 22, 23 selling technology, all the way up to 50, some people in sales selling technology. And what we found over last 6 years of, and this is obviously not a huge amount of data, but is that after about 2 or 3 years of experience in sales, age doesn't really matter. As an indication of your success, it's not a direct correlation after that. So there's usually, and I know you probably all agree with me, that there's a usually tendency to put older people in enterprise sales, and not necessarily a 24-year-old trying to sell to a CIO or to a CHRO or a CEO. And I think in that case, it actually might impact you adversely, because that's reverse ageism in some ways. And what we've seen is After about 2 or 3, 4 years of experience in sales, as long as they have that skill set to learn and adapt and move according to different buyer personas, age really doesn't make a difference after that. So I think it can go either way, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Do you mind if I throw out a question that we didn't discuss?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I was thinking about this just earlier today. If we get past the issue of ageism from a hiring perspective, what do you guys think of ageism in terms of managing people who are from a completely different generation? It used to be you show up for an interview in a suit and a tie, and last week I interviewed a kid who showed up in a hoodie. And then obviously in the office, right? There are different expectations in terms of how we operate, the communication, the culture. Have you guys found it challenging or fun or both to manage people who are literally from a completely different generation?
I'll start. I don't think it is challenging. Neither it is fun, but I think training is important, right? So one of the things we noticed, we also have another initiative called SheTech. We're trying to bring more women into technology industry, and we work with universities. There is definitely a huge gap between academia and the corporate world. So the most important thing is to train them to the culture fit, because every company has their own way of, how they dress up to the company dress code and the timings and, remote or to be in person. All these things differ company by company. So the training of the culture fit is necessary, right? So especially for someone who is fresh, young candidate, they have not been exposed to the corporate world. I think it's important to train them. And there has to be that adaptability, right? They should be able to accept and adapt to the culture and fit in the company. I think that's what is going to be making them successful.
So I have a funny story on that. I was interviewing for a director of marketing position at a young fintech company, and they were like, don't dress up unless you want to make us feel bad about ourselves. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So I was consulting with my teenage daughters, like, what do I wear? And I got the most casual outfit I could possibly find, and I was older by 15 to 20 years from everybody in the office. And I show up, and they were like, oh, we forgot to tell you, it was ugly Christmas sweater day. And I interviewed with a guy in onesie footy pajamas, how the Grinch stole Christmas. So I was like, I'm not a fit here. Like, I'm definitely not getting this job, no matter how good this interview is. So, having been in that position, I am uber, aware of making the kids feel good and fit in and adapting their culture and, teaching them the lessons of hey, text language doesn't work in a business email. Punctuation matters and things along those lines. But just having been in that uncomfortable situation, looking at a grown man in feety pajamas on an interview, I was like, we have to adapt and we have to be aware and adaptive and make them feel good, but then impart the wisdom, that this is how the grown-ups work.
Mark, you want to say something? You raised a question. Do you have any thoughts? Okay. Any of you want to add?
No, I think, actually, I just hired a developer right off of college campus, and he just has been a bright light, some of those common things from a corporate perspective, but he's actually taught us a lot. Some of the new technologies that he learned while he was at an internship at RIT, he was able to bring some fresh ideas. It's okay to say that we may have gotten a little bit stale in some of our traditional legacy development rules, and he was able to bring some bright lights in and really, taught us some new ways and a different lens to put on with some of the development aspects. So I think it's a two-way street for open culture and really adapting to some new ideas that the younger team members might bring.
I raised it really for that point, which is that it's not necessarily a right or wrong, right? It's just different. But sometimes we ourselves have to adapt, right? Obviously there are certain norms, right? You want your people to write full sentences and to say please and thank you, just like you want your children to do that. But sometimes you have to learn flexibility, and those are. I think that's also part of developing new skill sets so that, our careers can flourish.
Yeah. Shri, you have anything?
Well,
to
I was
add?
just thinking about situations where a 24-year-old is actually the manager of a 55-year-old. I think it's probably just an uncomfortable situation for both of them in many ways, unless they both can throw away that age aspect and fit the cultural, values that the organization has. I think that's a difficult problem to solve. I don't know if you can just take the emotion out
I
of
had
it.
that experience. It'll take too long to explain, but yeah, it requires a different technique. You need to first understand the person and see what they respect for and what they listen to, and I had to apply my techniques to actually get that person, work with me. It was difficult. It was difficult.
It's difficult also because a 24-year-old doesn't have necessarily that level
I was
of
not
wisdom,
25,
right?
yeah.
On how do I talk to this person without coming across as an insult, right? And if this person is not doing the job the way I expect them to, how do I phrase it correctly so that I don't feel like I'm disrespecting them? Those things are just hard, and I don't know if there's an easy way to do it unless you're just a really wise 24-year-old.
You brought a very important point, and that's one of the reasons, right, as people are promoted in the positions, even though we say we want to keep the age aside, but it's also the number of years of experience in the company that matters a lot when a person has to move up the ladder. So just in the interest of time, I just want to focus more on any tips and guidelines you have for people who are probably looking to transition into another job or reapplying or something. So quick tips can start with Kendall.
So I found the two things that have been the most important just in terms of changing career or, trying to, present myself as that digital native. I couldn't present myself as a digital native. After I built a company from 2003 to 2012, you think about everything that was invented at that point in time, and I learned it all, harnessed it all, used it for business, and I could not get a job in digital marketing. And so in working with a career coach, I got so frustrated, and she said, well, you have to find the alternate door. And she was 100% right. Maybe I couldn't go through the digital marketing, but I could go through the brand marketing door, or I could go through the, original marketing door and transition in, oh yeah, I know how to do that. I'll take over that. So the alternate door is a really, really good tip. And the second is the referral. I wouldn't be here today. I would not be in this amazing company that I'm with today if it hadn't been for the referral of two key stakeholders that I happen to know. One was a business partner and one I had pitched to. And so, that becomes, I have no experience in the furniture vertical, really no e-commerce experience, and no B2B experience, but I have a toolkit that they thought might be helpful to this company and to the president of this company. And so they were like, why don't you sit down and talk with him? And, there was a really good fit, and I felt that I could add value in other ways. I could learn that industry. So I think it's super important to have that referral.
So I think, what I'm going to say has nothing to do with age. I just think it has to do with being a human. So number one is ask for help. Don't beat around the bush, but I think that human nature is people want to help. And if you reach out to somebody and say, I need help, they will help you. If you pretend that things are great and you're really looking for a job and you don't say that, so you don't get the help you need. I think you need to be very clear. And, from experience, I had a situation where I met with a person who could have opened any door that I needed. And I said to her, so can you just, send my CV out to people? And she said, yeah, sure, but I'm not going to do your job for you. Go into my LinkedIn profile, pick the top people who you want to meet, come back and tell me why you want to meet them, and I will make those introductions. A week later, I had the opportunity to say the same exact thing to someone else, and it kind of felt gross to hear it, but I said the same exact thing to another guy, and a month later, the guy got a job with a company that he identified he wanted to work for. I was able to connect him to it. He was a young guy, and he's now like the COO of, of a Israeli unicorn. And then the third, and I think most important thing is to say thank you. Don't forget, to thank people for their help, and then even to follow up down the road and, check in and tell them how great you're doing, because, people, you want to pay it forward, and I think people, when they know that their help actually helps, they're inclined to help other people.
I think one other thing I would say is find what you're good at, right? As Kendall mentioned, right? So you have to do your homework, and you have to find the right fit job for you. If it's not, do your homework, empower yourself, learn the techniques. And every time we go to the interview, we all know, right? They always look for how can you help them? What benefit can you bring or value you can bring to the company? I think it's important for us to continuously learn and then also find the right fit for ourselves to make that next move.
I'm going to go on a slightly different tangent. I think it comes down to belief, right? If you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you're right. And I think if you believe, and what happens is as you get, I think some of us, as we get older, we get also jaded, and you start saying, I don't think I can do that. That's like some new stuff. I don't know how I'll be able to figure it out. And that comes down to your belief system, right? If you believe that you can and you can learn, I think that will come across in your confidence when you talk to the other person, and I believe that it will translate to you being able to, because you being able to learn because you've done it in the past. You're still the same person. You've done it in your 20s, you've done it in your 30s. There's no reason to believe that you can't do it in your 40s and your 50s.
Yeah, and I think one thing that even in the past year, probably more than ever, just finding the right network of individuals who are like-minded in the same industry, or even outside of where you currently are, that help to push you to your limits and to really help you explore where maybe some outreach opportunity may live. I really do believe in that the coaching and mentoring relationships, not only when you're new into a career, but a continuous opportunity to provide that. 15 minutes of somebody's time could mean more from a mentoring perspective than a committed 1 hour a month. So as I continually look at the past year, I think just the networking and the ability to provide those coaching and mentoring moments, both for me as well as me providing that to others, really has been very impactful for my career.
That's a great point too. I mentor, people, and there's so much I learn from them. Especially when you're mentoring younger people, you get to learn from them, and they learn from you too. The mentorship is very, very powerful. So I think I just want to leave some time for questions. If anyone has any questions, or maybe you have some suggestions.
We have time for just a couple of questions, and there's a microphone right up here if you'd like to step up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ronnie White, and I'm in New York City. My company is RWD, and I'm also representing Bendham at this conference. Thank you so much for your comments and insight. I, too, am a member of several boards and have noticed that there's a diverse population on the boards. And it is so true that there are examples where because of the more senior members, they have a wealth of knowledge, and they can prevent us trying to reinvent the wheel. But I noticed that there's a group of them that also are very active in staying tech savvy. And I think one thing that I've noticed is regardless of the age, there has to be that engagement. The younger set can't dismiss, the older can't dismiss the younger. They both have to actively seek and reach out to learn and help grow the common cause. Thank you so much.
There
Thank you
there
so
were
much.
definitely a lot of 80-year-olds who learned Zoom over this past year, you know,
Yeah,
to
of
keep in
course.
touch with family and friends.
Good evening. So I agree with all of you guys, everything that you guys said, especially the culture. But what about the business aspect of it? Say if I don't know, 45-year-old is going against a college kid, the pay rate will be different. From a business standpoint, would we rather, as a hiring manager, would we rather pay a smaller wage for a longer period of time with training versus a higher wage in a shorter period of time from when they may retire?
I mean, there's no question that that's a factor. If you just look at the statistics, it's clear that one of the reasons that older workers struggle to find new employment is because of both their salary requirement and also health care requirements. So it's, and then when you get down to it, if a guy came in, a 45-year-old guy with a lot of experience came in and said, hey, I'll take the lower paying job and I'll work my way up. And, people do get skeptical because a 45-year-old guy has different, or woman, has a different nut to crack than, somebody just out of college. And, they may be just taking this job just as a short-term position, to bridge the gap. And I think that, that's definitely a factor. The areas that we can clean this up, let's say, are, or where the playing field is level. I mean, entry-level positions are entry-level positions for a reason. I don't think it's unfair to discriminate against somebody who's, too experienced for a, entry-level job, because those jobs exist for a reason. I think what we're talking about here is when the same person can do, when two people can do the same job with no other issues, or the other issues being, minimal, and you automatically default to a younger person for the reasons we discussed, that's where policy needs to, try, come in and rule. But, at the end of the day, your first job out of college, you wouldn't want to be doing your first job out of college today, even if you needed the money, right?
Good answer.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions, and for the panelists. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you.